Ladies and gentlemen, pay attention. This is your boy, the coach from the WWE. I would like to welcome you to the very first wrestling podcast in the world to take you on a weekly deep dive into classic matches along with legends of the squared circle. Enjoy the discussion. Enjoy the back and forth. There's so much to get into. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Payoff.
Jeff, it's all about the game and how you play it. This is Tom Healy, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Jeffrey Ryan. Jeff, we're covering Triple H and Hulk Hogan. But first of all, how the hell are you feeling, buddy?
What you gonna do, brother, when you got a not great match? So we're gonna get through this one. It'll be good. I'm doing all right, man.
You know, you kind of sounded like Hulk Hogan with an Italian accent.
It was a poor Macho Man too, I thought, as I got to the end there. So that's okay though. But it's still excited, as you can tell, to kind of talk about this one. Like, as we like to say, sometimes it's a great match, 5-star classic. Other times it's a not so great match. But we're going to kind of walk that line here a little bit today. But I'm excited, though. You can always find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram. It's Facebook, @PayoffPod. And you know the deal. We don't always have to say it. But listen, wherever you listen to, give us those 5 stars on the Apple Podcasts and spread the word about the show. So, yeah, Tom, what else you got right now?
I got nothing, man. I'm looking forward to covering this one. I have not watched the match. You haven't watched the match either. We watched some of the build and vignettes and stuff leading up to it. I'm really curious how the match played out. It was an interesting circumstance, right? Because it's like we never knew if we'd see Hogan back. Then we see him back, and I know you'll get into all that with the build, but this is just one of those interesting of everything surrounding the match, more so than maybe even the match itself. But I'm looking forward to this episode. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about. So I guess, why do you want to cover this one?
Yeah, this is one, I think it's not known or remembered for being a great match. I think, as we will talk about, how Hogan came back for this one, or not came back, but the persona that he had come back for this one was a big deal about this. And then when you think about it, it's really odd. I mean, this was almost 18 years ago, Triple H. And so
it's crazy.
Yeah, and so I think that's part, more than anything, why I'm excited about this one is, this was, when he was, he'd gone through so many other characters and kind of where he was at right now. And, this kind of match, and we've talked about him and, the Click and all kinds of different, being involved in certain things and Degeneration X. This one I'm excited to kind of jump into, there's just, like you said, there's just a lot of weird pieces to this one, but I'm excited.
Yeah, I remember obviously being excited about Hogan being back and the red and yellow. So when I brought this up as a match I wanted to cover, it was more of was this better than I remember it? Was it not as good as I remember it? Like, where was it? Because, I remember being happy about it, but I don't remember a lot about the match and the build and everything else. So, and I'm sure many of you don't either. I also think, Jeff, I was thinking about this the other day. It's interesting how when things happen at WrestleMania, I feel like I remember them really, really well. And oftentimes when they don't, we don't remember them as well. So sometimes there's things that didn't happen at WrestleMania that were better than we remember them. Sometimes it's worse. And so just kind of interesting. So I'm looking forward to, again, evaluating this one and how does it hold up? And gosh, man, doesn't it make you feel old? This was 18 years ago. It's crazy. So let's get right into the build.
Oh, it's time for the build.
So here we are. We're at the Kemper Arena, Kansas City. It's Backlash 2002, April 21st, 2002. This is the pay-per-view following WrestleMania. We've got 12,000 in attendance. And we're here to cover the main event of Triple H, the champion, against Hulk Hogan, the challenger for the undisputed WWF Championship. But let's look at what happened here on this card just 1 month after WrestleMania. We start off with Tajiri defeating Billy Kidman. That's for your new Cruiserweight Championship, 9 minutes. So they're trying to, in some ways, replicate what they did with the WCW Cruiserweights and start off with a bang. Fan of each of those guys. Then we have Scott Hall defeating Bradshaw. Scott Hall's with X-Pac. Bradshaw's with Farouk. Man, 5 minutes.
What a team.
Yeah, just odd, right? I mean, just they're trying to do this whole NWO thing. They bring in X-Pac, so now it's Nash, Hall, X-Pac. Nash is nowhere to be found in terms of working much at this time. He's wrestling some matches. It didn't work. Jazz defeating Trish Stratus by submission. That's to retain the women's championship. 4-minute match, man. So we've got a 9-minute match, a 5-minute match, and a 4-minute match to start. Then you're going to get a 5-minute match, and gosh, I'm surprised it went this long, with Brock Lesnar making his pay-per-view debut, defeating Jeff Hardy. Interesting.
Just rough. Yeah.
Yeah, and ironically, according to Wikipedia, they called it defeating him with the TKO. So I guess we didn't have a name for the F5 yet, or at least didn't have the correct one. Then we get Kurt Angle defeating Edge, 13-minute match. And then Eddie Guerrero defeating the Intercontinental Champion Rob Van Dam, 11-minute match. Then we have The Undertaker defeating Steve Austin. Gosh, man. Austin, I brought this up a little bit. Dude, what's interesting about Steve Austin, and don't get me wrong, guy made a ton of money, drew major box offices, sold a ton of merch. But, dude, his last year, I mean, it wasn't good, okay? So he didn't really do much in 2002. And then, of course, he's out of there in 2003. This is also, a few months before he would take his ball and go home. So, gosh, Austin, again, he has that great match with Hart at 13. 14, he wins the championship. 15, he regains the championship. 16, he's out of that four-way. 17, he turns heel on The Rock. 18, it's Scott Hall. And then 19, he retires. And he really wasn't around in 2002. So, again, Austin did some amazing stuff, but his run was not as long as you remember. I mean, think about it. Steve Austin's entire run on top during this era is going to end up being half as long as Brock Lesnar's current run on top. Now, I know not full-time. I'm not saying he drew as much money, but just in terms of longevity, it's just hard to imagine. Then we get kind of that buffer match before the other big main event. Billy and Chuck, who are your champions, along with Rico, defeating Al Snow and Maven. What a tag team that was in 5 minutes and 58 seconds. And then the reason we're here, it's Hulk Hogan, it's Triple H, undisputed championship. And again, remember, that's undisputed where we had the two championships, and now we're combining them. So interesting time in the business, Jeff. How did we get to this storyline? Because, in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, Hogan comes back. Then he loses to The Rock. Without wrestling again, he's now getting a title shot. And I know it's wrestling. I know we have to suspend belief. But what's the point of titles? What's the point of wins and losses if they really don't matter and it's obvious? And then his opponent, The Rock, is nowhere to be found on this show. So explain to us how we get there from a storyline standpoint.
Yeah, there's not a ton of build on this one. And like you said, it's just odd how this kind of played out. And so,
Vince just announced it on a SmackDown.
Yeah, and that's all it was, is Vince just announced it. And then, what had happened, though, and why this, I guess, was a bigger deal. And like you said, it asked the bigger question of kind of what we remember as being better than it actually was. And just, the payoff on some of these things that, Mr. McMahon just made Hogan the number one contender. And the big piece of this was that Hogan came out in his red and yellow. It was the first time since he came back to WWF in quite a few years. And so him then coming back and doing that, of course, everybody it's just, the iconic, people know how he is. I did watch this clip. I kind of went back, and the pop, I will say that was the pop for when he came back. It's just like, most returning wrestlers that, we see in the, all the time at Rumbles, or just really any occasion, that Raw after Mania, whatever it might be, like the pop is just gigantic. And so, and this was a huge pop for him when he came back. And so, and in having this match with Triple H, that Hogan wasn't going to back down from this. A lot of different players in this. And I almost feel like, at post Mania, that this pay-per-view is really like, it was really just like a stepping stone on the road to the next pay-per-view. Because when we talk about the aftermath, like some of the players that were involved in this, all the feuds really kept going. And so you had Jericho and Kurt Angle involved in this a little bit. You had the Undertaker being involved at certain points too, which we'll talk about with the match and things like that. And so you had, of course, like as we see, it's like the standard, like the two, Triple H and Hogan, had to tag team and take on people. And, there was shenanigans there. It's just, with, Hogan, eventually he hit Triple H with a steel chair, and just, and then Triple H hit Hogan with the chair after the tag match. It's just, I say it's anymore, like, as much as we analyze these matches of everybody, like it's like kind of that standard storytelling point that they go to all the time, of like, you got to have your two opponents tag team once or twice, like in a lead up, or
of course,
to their big match, in order to like demonstrate, that they can't get along. It's like that piece of storytelling, I feel like, is just so basic, but that's where we got. And so, like I said, it was a fairly short build too. It really started on April 4th was when, Hogan was announced. And then April 21st was when the match took place. And so it was a very quick build. And that's why I call it really like a stepping stone to what came next, because these guys, they really didn't feud with each other much. Well, we'll talk about it after the fact, but yeah, there were, quick build, just a couple of weeks. We get to this point. The only kind of, weird stipulation was if Triple H lost, he'd have to switch brands. This was, the SmackDown Fist and things like that. So, just odd, not a ton, just couple matches, a couple promos, and we get a match.
Well, and something interesting that I was thinking about as you were talking is, keep in mind, I think sometimes we forget this is not the network era. And so what I mean by that is, look, WrestleMania 18, it's successful. We pack a big building. Taker Flair was pretty awesome. Hogan Rock was awesome, blah, 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 right? Well, guess what? Now we got to sell the next pay-per-view. Okay, now we need, for 250,000, whatever it is, people to buy that next pay-per-view. So we have to give them a main event. We have to give them something they haven't seen before. We got to, essentially every 30 days, hot shot something else. Okay, so, you look at it and you're like, well, yeah, would they have done this and this, who knows if they would have done it now. But at the time, they, a lot of times they had to figure out something, right? And so in this case, look, the plan wasn't for Hogan to win the title 30 days after WrestleMania or whatever, but they were like, well, hell, can we pop a rating? Can we get, a little extra eyeballs on TV? Can we get maybe, an extra 50,000 people buying the pay-per-view times $30? Great. At this point, we're a publicly traded company. So these month-to-month numbers matter quite a bit. So it's just interesting.
And the network wasn't a thing till 2014. So this was long before, but
Sure.
You're right. You gotta sell tickets, not only to the arena, but on pay-per-view.
Yeah. And so they, again, they did some of this hot shotting, I think even more than they do now, because, month to month matters less now than it did then. Man, going back and watching some of this stuff, like Triple H is a good guy. No, thank you. Now, when he came back from his, and they were calling it, I think, a hamstring injury. I thought he tore his quad, but regardless, when he comes back from his injury, he is over like crazy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I understood he wins the Rumble, he goes on to WrestleMania, he wins the title. That all makes sense, right? I get it. But, man, in terms of the build, it's like if Hogan's coming back as the Babe Ruth, the hero, the red and yellow, you got to give him a heel, right? You need someone to be like, look, Grandpa, I'm going to beat your ass on Sunday, right? And Triple H kind of did some heelish stuff. Like he said some heelish stuff like, hey, I respect you and it's an honor, but I'm not holding back in the ring. So there wasn't there wasn't the heat of, the villain attacking him, beating the shit out of him, calling him old, maybe bigger or physically more imposing or whatever. It didn't work in terms of the build. And then again, I mentioned it before, but it just didn't feel like it made a whole hell of a lot of sense that, Hogan's getting the title shot. And it was Vince in the back going, I don't care what the fans think. I'm giving Hulk Hogan a title shot. Like, okay. So again, yes, I know that maybe this wasn't going to be the greatest thing in the world and it was kind of sped up, but man, if you're telling me, hey, we're bringing Hogan back red and yellow, we need a way to do it, I think you'd come up with something better than that. And that's what always frustrates me. And I'm not saying everything has to be a 5-star classic. I'm not saying everything has to be booked incredibly well. Every build has to be incredible, right? I'm not saying that, but gosh, if you gave, a couple of wrestling fans a notebook in 5 minutes and said, how do we get to Hogan, Triple H? We're filming it here in an hour. Jot some stuff down. Let's get this thing built. I got to think you could come up with something better, right? Even Triple H coming out and going, look, Hogan, I'm impressed by you. I want the old Hulk Hogan for the title. Like anything, right? I'm just coming up with this off the top of my head. So just not the best build. And not a lot there. So,
and we'll touch on, we'll get there. There's some thoughts on the match too, but we'll actually get to the match. So go for it.
Cool. So, that's all I have. Let's jump into this match. For those of you that want to watch it with us, we're at the 2 hour and 20 minute mark of Backlash 2002, the 2 hour, 20 minute mark of Backlash 2002, and it's Triple H coming in the ring. He's challenger already entered and champions entering. So let's jump into the payoff.
Oh, it's time for the payoff.
What do you think of Hulk Hogan not coming out to Real American, first of all?
That I always have liked the Jimi Hendrix entrance. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, I know, but they had like the knockoff on the network because they don't have the rights to it.
Yeah, so they don't have the rights to it, and I think that it's they're both classic for their own reasons, plain and simple. Yeah, but sometimes nothing wrong with it. So.
I wanted Real American. I don't like it. We get the fake music and the fake piped in crowd noise. So that already major strike against it. So Hogan and Triple H, they're looking at each other. It's, I forget, the Undisputed. That's where you had the old WCW NWA belt. Then you had the WWF WWE Championship, and we had the 2 championships at this point, which that was terrible.
Yeah, you had the Undisputed, and then you had the champ. Yeah, well, it's like nowadays too. There's just too many belts. You and I have said that forever.
So Earl
Earl
Hebner in the ring. Hogan wearing the Hulk still rules at this point, which I don't know. I mean, I guess to nod that he's older. We're calling him Hollywood Hogan, which he wasn't Hollywood Hogan. Hollywood Hogan wears black and white, so just kind of odd all around.
He is wearing the red and yellow. And the weight belt does say Hollywood, yeah. So that's something else just to kind of
no major stare down. Again, there's no major heat here. It's not like God Hogan's been chomping at the bit. I mean, it's more of it's two guys that respect each other, and we're gonna have a match. It's interesting.
Yeah, and so this one is. A big gripe on this one is, and Triple H looks huge, right now. So he's still a big dude, but he looks pretty jacked for this match right now. So a big ding, and we'll kind of get is just how long this one's going to go right now. And so and them kind of tying up. It goes a little bit over 20 minutes. We know that one. What do you think would have been a good? Like why do you think that they decided to go 20 minutes with this one? Like, do you think it was ever even discussed to cut that time in half? Like, what are your thoughts?
I'll tell you why they went 20 minutes, because they went 20 minutes in the main event of every main event at this time. And, the reason I, remember that is because, there was a point where, and I think it was Triple H was like, look, the reason Bill Goldberg didn't work in WCW or WWE is because, you have to learn how to work a 20-minute main event if you're the champion. So that was always the expectation. This is the reason. This is why we got to this show. This is what we built towards. It's the main event. We have to give them 20 minutes. Now, that's obviously changed as time goes on. Now we have 4-hour pay-per-views. We have networks. We have multiple championships. You can sometimes put the short match in the middle or as opposed to the end. Or, hell, you just end the pay-per-view with, Goldberg beating Lesnar and you go for that effect. So, it's just different now. But at the time, it was, main events go 20 minutes. It's a championship match. And they all did it.
And I'm looking at a list of like some of the main events that were this year, because we talked a little bit about like 2002, I think before we kind of were getting on here recording, and just like how crazy some of the wrestling was during this year. If you go like looking at some of the pay-per-views here, No Way Out, it was Jericho versus Stone Cold for the Undisputed Championship. Backlash, which was obviously this one, you got Triple H in Hollywood, Hulk Hogan, or however you want to call him, Hulk Hogan. The next pay-per-view, and we'll talk about it a little in a bit in the aftermath, it's Triple H and Undertaker. Then you go back to Hollywood and Undertaker. Then you got Undertaker and Triple H. So you can kind of see where the aftermath is going to go on this one. But, and then you get the Undertaker, The Rock, and Kurt Angle after that. So a lot of like the names on this one are kind of crazy for your main events. So I just noticed too, Hogan's boots have his face on them.
Oh yeah, there you go.
I did not notice that. So, but I think, like to your point, like there was some really good wrestling here. And so, I get the appeal of Hulk Hogan. I wonder, should, some of these names have been pushed maybe a little bit different here. Like, it's just one of those things. So the test of strength here happening right now, Hogan down on a knee, or Triple H just kind of wrenching, Hogan down, holding him down by the hands, things like that. The classic kind of look, and then Hogan getting up at this point again.
Yeah, when's the last time you saw a test of strength?
You know what? That's something that would be good for us to like, kind of figure out a list of like what are some of these things that we just don't see anymore.
When's the last time you saw an abdominal stretch?
Seriously,
atomic drop,
torture rack, like all that stuff. Yeah, like some of these moves. I actually think there's a time and place for some of these things too. Like why aren't other than Undertaker, we don't ever see a tombstone either. But there's
why doesn't someone do the torture rack? It's a great move, and what would be cool is someone that did like the torture rack, but then they also like sometimes hit people with like they transitioned it into some kind of a slam or whatever. Like it'd be cool if Braun Strowman did the torture rack, but then sometimes he if they weren't giving up, he could transition into a power slam. For the 1, 2, 3. By the way, how awful of a finishing move is Braun Strowman's power slam?
Yeah, well, that one, and I think back to like another move that we don't see very often. It's like very much, but like the British Bulldog did it the best. But like the vertical suplex, like the stalling, like holding them in the air, like you just don't see that very often. And every time you do, though, Hulk hulking up, there's a huge pop. Like if they're holding somebody up in the air for like, just the longest times. Like and something else too that's rare that we don't see anymore is the 10 count turnbuckle slams or like punches.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, like when was I don't even remember the last time we saw it. It might be at like a house show or something, but and it's happening more there. But it's one of those like you wonder is what is Vince allowing and not allowing.
You like Triple H better as a face or a heel?
Definitely a heel.
Yeah,
absolutely a heel.
No question.
I think or corporate Triple H, whatever it might be. It's one of those, I think that he's just over his career. Like that's been where his character has been the best. I don't know if like all his time, it's hard because I think when like his Degeneration X time, like was he a heel always? Like,
yeah, I mean, most of it, yeah.
I would agree. Like he is a heel, but like he was also like, he was like the Stone Cold. He was the cheered heel. And so, things like that. He wasn't like the constant always getting heat heel. And so I think there's something to that too, of just kind of like, how he's performed and done with that, that's why I kind of hesitate. Like, was he a heel in name? Sure. But like, was he acting like getting like, the pop like he should because of it? No.
So this is the first Triple H match we've covered.
It is. Yes. That's a very good point.
Yeah. He's
always been on
he was in
yes.
The Rock's debut, but we have not covered a one-on-one Triple H match.
Well, and yeah, he's always on the outskirts of whatever we're talking about, be it the Generation X or whatever it might be, or the New Age Outlaws joining DX or the Click or things like that. And so,
so let me ask you this: is he underrated or overrated in his career?
I think that I think he's probably underrated, because
really?
I say that because of how he has really reinvented himself over the years. That he was like, the snooty, like, starting out as like, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and then really growing it, into an authority figure, in the ring when he kind of had that role. And now like truly like an authority, like, and kind of running NXT, and, does a little bit. And like the stuff he does, especially like the behind the scenes stuff with Triple H, like that stuff's always funny. Like that's for forever. Like lately, the most recent when, they kind of swerved us and we thought Triple H was or Shawn Michaels was going to fight. He was taking his jacket off and then he faked like he was cold. Like that was just funny. I think that he's got like comedic talent that a lot of people forget if you haven't been watching wrestling since the D-Generation X days and the Tank and all those kinds of different things that they are not, doing all that type of stuff. And so I would say underrated because of like fans and even myself, we just don't remember all of the stuff that he's done throughout his career. What about you?
It's interesting because I was probably going to hit you with overrated, but let me tell you what's interesting about Triple H. His out of ring stuff, right? Promos and vignettes and, some of the antics of DX, all this stuff, right? Everything outside of professional wrestling matches. I think he's excellent, right? I love his promos. Okay. I loved obviously the DX stuff. I love the stuff he does now as kind of a executive, but sometimes wrestler. I love it all. Here's my problem with Triple H is his matches just fall flat. Mm-hmm. There's just so many times where he's had great builds and I've been interested in the storylines. And then the matches, the Batista match at WrestleMania, it wasn't that great. His big title match against Orton at WrestleMania, that kind of sucked. Him and Jericho at this WrestleMania at 18, kind of sucked. Reigns, that match, he won the title and he was the bad guy, won the Rumble and then lost it to Reigns. All of that was great up until the match. Wasn't that great? I mean, the only two guys that I feel, there's like maybe three guys that brought out really good matches in him. Shawn a bunch of times, Taker a couple times, and he's had some good matches with The Rock. But otherwise, man, I just think he's had so many just shit matches. And, even you look at this match, his offense just isn't that great, right? So unless he has a really fantastic dance partner in there to work with, I just doesn't do it for me. So that's why it's weird. It's like Triple H's body of work's incredible, but then you put the matches on and you're like, crowd's sitting on their hands for that one.
Well, and I think it's one of those, like, he does get over the years, he's gotten a lot of shit for just being on the card to begin with. But then I
don't mind that. I just mind the matches. I mean, here you go. I'll play the sound right now. You hear anything? You hear any fans? Dude, they're all sitting there bored. I mean, it's dead right now.
And I think part of it too is he is always constantly getting shredded, at least in like Reddit and Twitter.
Hogan just hit Triple H with a diamond cutter.
And it was not a great one, but there it was. And the fans didn't do anything. They didn't react or anything. But he gets a lot of shit for how long his matches are.
And I think that people say they're long because they're plotting. Oh, think about the stuff he's done over in Australia and Saudi Arabia. Those Taker matches, they never ended.
And I think that's part, even like we're seeing it with like this match, it just goes on. Like it cut half of the match. Like, why do we need this? And this is one where you do have Hogan, like his limitations are.
He's taking out Hogan's knee. Why? I mean, he's not a bad guy. So why is he doing chop blocks? It's just, this doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and part of this too is, like watching these guys, like, are they really matched well? No. Like,
no.
Is Triple H gonna, do the work to give Hogan a good match? No.
Well, the thing too, but it's like you can't knock Hogan as a worker because he just had a great match against The Rock. Like, the guy still can work matches. Triple H, blade job, I'm assuming. He's punching him in the forehead. I'm assuming he's about to. Maybe he's not going to bleed. I don't know.
You never know with Hogan. Yeah. This is another one too. We don't see the wrapping, like using the ring post, kind of hurting the leg,
or doing the figure four on the to the outside there on the post. No, I remember the first time Bret Hart did that. I'm like, holy shit, that has to hurt. That's crazy. Hey, just go working this knee. I don't like it.
Well, and that's, you've got the heel. And so, and part of it is, is it selling, and Hogan just a bad bump there. It didn't look good, just kind of how slow it was and kind of dealing with that. But and so these longer matches that he puts himself in and books himself in, it's like, why? You don't need it. And I would be fine, like, if he doesn't have another Mania match or anything like that, because, part of it is, we say it, like, you need to push the other people. You need to give the younger guys the opportunity, because it's just, otherwise we get stuff like this. And I think there's a time and place for, having these legends and things like that. But it's just, it's not a great match to watch right now, because now Triple H is going to work on the leg over for 4 or 5 minutes at this point.
Yeah. So how about, instead of us describing Triple H working over the leg for the next 5 minutes, since that's where it looks like this one's going, dude, here's what I came across in my research. It's kind of interesting. And I guess you could probably play this game of any year in professional wrestling, but listen to 2002, right? The WWF changes to WWE. Brock Lesnar debuts and, he's champion before you know it. Shawn Michaels would return just in a few months against Triple H. You have Hogan having some matches. Ric Flair's wrestling some matches. The Rock is making the transition to Hollywood. Okay. Austin's final couple months. TNA's launching. And then they did their first roster split, the first draft. How's that for, just some of the stuff going on in the business?
Which is just, it's just kind of, we look back and this was, I don't know if you'd call this attitude era necessarily, but it's kind of right in that time, still working the leg over. I just don't get it.
It's not attitude era. It's not ruthless aggression.
No, and it's kind of that weird period, because I remember like 2002 is when I was a graduating senior in high school, and like kind of getting into, this is when me and the buddies would watch and, kind of hang out together and do that type of stuff. And in 2002, I remember like that we would all kind of rotate like who would, host and kind of be at different, where we were going to watch the different events and things like that. And it really wasn't, like, stuff like this, it wasn't the greatest time in wrestling, I guess, at least for like having matches like this. Maybe not the greatest time, but like some of the match choices were not great.
Well, that's an interesting point, because I'm sitting here going, man, there's some pretty cool shit happening in 2002. That being said, and you rattled off some of the main events. I know we'll talk more about it later as to like what happened. The wrestling was not great. I mean, if you look at the roster, and I read, obviously what happened on this show, but dude, you look at this roster. I mean, that's why, like, I sometimes when like, and look, I have plenty of gripes about the current product, but sometimes when you gripe about the current product, I'm like, do you understand that like these guys, the work rate is like 1,000,000 times better? Like, there was some just awful wrestling for large periods of time, including like around this era. I mean,
it was people that weren't wrestlers. Like if you were a giant dude and like, if you were 6'7", 6'6", and were jacked, you could have been hired as a wrestler. Yeah. And you may have not had the background or training like you do now. And this goes back to the point you make a lot of times of just like, everyone getting trained the same way at the PC. I think that's, there's something to be said for that, because yes, everybody's getting trained the same way. So you see a lot of the same styles. You did at least have different styles back then, but or back at this time in 2002. But was the wrestling as good? No, probably not.
Well, and remember, this is a thin roster, and then they did the brand split. So there was some stuff. And I mean, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I was watching SmackDown on UPN or My Network TV or wherever the hell it was at this time. I certainly wasn't watching SmackDown every week. But like, man, you look at some of those shows and like, with all due respect to, Billy and Chuck and some of these, I mean, there were just shitty wrestlers on at this time.
Well, and when your bathroom match is Billy and Chuck, like for this pay-per-view, taking on Al Snow and Maven, like that says something. Like, we really got to take a look at that and evaluate what we're doing when like that is our bathroom match before this one. So yeah, just crazy. So now we're probably about at least a solid 10 minutes at this point where Triple H has been just working over Hogan's leg. It hasn't really been, there has been very little, I say, hard striking offense in this one.
I mean, to me, like this type of match doesn't need 20 minutes of Triple H working over Hogan's knee, sleeper hold coming. What this match needs is like get out on the floor, right? I mean, you can do some bells and whistles to make up for this, but man, this is just it's a bad match.
Hogan going to sleep. You don't see a sleeper hold very often either. You see different versions of it, but you don't see like a true, behind the back sleeper hold like he's got him in right now.
Look how weak that sleeper hold is. Oh my God.
Well, and I think that's part of his Hogan. Oh, and like he's got his arm up. You don't see the arm 1, 2, 3 of the arm and seeing if they're passed out or not anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much a Hulk Hogan like 80s match, an 80s babyface match.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's a good thing.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's
right?
so nice.
I mean, this match looks like it's on like Saturday night's main event.
And there's the third arm, keeping the arm, just barely. So, yep. Nope. Yeah, of course. So, that's one of those, Hogan hulking up. And the fans. Hey, can you give me a little bit of sound here? Are the fans doing much?
The challenger,
zero.
A little bit of time.
The only people making noise are JR.
Left leg, there you see.
There's nothing.
The left leg, this line. Sometime, but
and it's not like Hogan wasn't over. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's just one of those things where now, you've had almost 20 minutes of Triple H just working Hogan over. It just hasn't been exciting to see. Like, I guess maybe that's part of it is I just don't want to watch somebody beat up. And it's be hard, but I don't want to watch someone beat up an old dude for 15 minutes. Like, it's kind of like the Taker Brock stuff. Like, in him, Undertaker, I say putting him over. There's the one big boot. Yep, that's all it takes, and then a leg drop. Yep. We have shenanigans with the ref getting pulled out of the ring with Jericho, which, as you remember, Jericho.
Chair shot to the head on Hogan.
Messing with, and the build up to this. But yeah.
So what's Jericho pissed off about? He's trying to help Triple H win?
There was just a feud back and forth, where they were what was it? Let me refer back to my notes here for everybody. Yeah.
Triple H. Okay, so now Triple H is going to attack Jericho because he's a good guy and he doesn't want Hogan. And what? Why?
The Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle were feuding with Edge, and Hogan helped out Edge, and so and then Triple H fought Angle, and Jericho got involved. Just weird stuff. Hogan attacked Triple H, got taken out by Jericho and Angle. Like just a bunch of like I said, there was just a lot of weird pieces to this, but none of it was exciting.
Hogan's hulking up. Here we go. Now everyone's standing. They're all standing up. Missed the leg drop. They're all standing up there. There you go, category. Hit the category. Hebner's awake now. 1, 2. Now Taker's here. Taker hits Hebner. So I guess they're just trying to set up their summer programs here next couple of months.
And like I said, this is why I think it was a stepping stone match.
There you go. Here comes the chair. Oh, chair. Dude, I'm telling you, man, those chair shots to the head, man, I hate seeing them now. I mean,
they're getting their hand. They both got their hands up a little bit on those ones, but you're still taking a chair shot, plain and simple. Like, let's call it what it is.
It's not. Taker was trying to help Hogan win.
Taker dragging Triple H. You had his shoulders up, and
not my favorite Taker era. Short hair, kind of biker. He's like kind of a heel. Hogan with the leg drop. Place does go nuts.
Yep. Just, I have thoughts, but yeah.
I mean, they are going nuts, man. I mean, that's why this should have been better, right? Because they obviously wanted to see it. They are going absolutely crazy. So we can talk more about this, but let's jump into the aftermath.
Oh, it's time for the aftermath.
All right, Jeff. What'd you think? What do you have for us?
I'll get into what I think, but we'll
You
start.
You look very stressed out.
I'm not stressed. We'll get into my score in a little bit. It's just one of those things. So, Triple H and Chris Jericho, they actually continued their feud after this one. Jericho actually defeating Triple H. It was the number one contenders match, and his interference again from the Undertaker, which this is why it cost him the match. So, but it continued where Jericho challenging Hulk Hogan for the title. It was a no DQ match. And then if any superstar got involved, they'd be suspended. Of course, we had different superstars getting involved. And then you have Mr. McMahon getting involved and Triple H, putting his hands on Mr. McMahon. Just, weird how this played out. And then, all kinds of different people on this one play, Hardcore Holly, Test, Lance Storm, Christian, like getting involved to beat down Triple H. And, what it really boiled down to was it was a Hell in a Cell match at Judgment Day, which would be a rematch between Triple H and Chris Jericho, a WrestleMania rematch, actually. And so you had that. Eventually, the feud did between Jericho and Triple H. It ended at Judgment Day with Triple H defeating Jericho in that Hell in a Cell match. And so you kind of had that going. And you had Undertaker, after he earlier in this card where we talked about a little bit, beat Stone Cold, the Undertaker, and you could see it a little bit with Hogan and Undertaker getting into it in this match. The two of them kind of starting a feud a little bit too, going back and forth. Undertaker again kind of interfering in match, a lot of interference, interfering in different
a ton, man. It's just after a while it just gets annoying.
And it was actually like a week later, Hogan was having a non-title match with William Regal. Undertaker was hitting Hogan with his strap. Eventually, again, it was at Judgment Day with Mr. McMahon helping him. The Undertaker beat Hogan, won the championship on this one.
That was interference in an 11-minute match. Terrible.
Yeah. And so it just, how it kind of played out, just weird. Not, as you can tell just from hearing me and talking about it, I just wasn't excited about this one, like just not great. But how did the reviews, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I know just a couple of things. I mean, so, obviously, look, as a Hogan mark, I mean, I love him being back. Hell, it's kind of cool seeing him win the championship, but it was just odd, man. Then, he puts over Angle at King of the Ring. Him and Edge would become tag team champions, but they'd lose that at Vengeance. He puts over Brock on the way to SummerSlam. And then he's not even on the SummerSlam card, right? That was the Rock, Brock, and then Triple H, HBK matches. But nothing from Hogan there. And Hogan's kind of gone up until WrestleMania 19 when he would beat Vince McMahon in that street fight, which that'd be a fun one to go back and watch. And then, Triple H is, again, he enters the year as this massive baby face. He's already starting to, make the transition to heel. And then, of course, he becomes a heel when he turns on HBK. That leads to their series of matches throughout the rest of the year. So again, considering the players, all these guys we're talking about are freaking Hall of Famers, right? There's just a lot of shit booking, both in terms of matches, results, storylines, interference, everything. So again, you're working with the right talent, right? There's enough talent on this roster to win a championship, at least to have something good going on up at top. But man, just the booking just blew at this point. Yeah. So let's get into the reviews, and then we'll give our payoff scores.
So I'll start with, we've been kind of adding it to the show recently, the PWI, and kind of where they ranked for 2002, actually. This was, you had Hogan coming in at number 19, Triple H coming in at number 10. So Triple H, they both had a lot of matches this year, so I get why they're higher. I wouldn't say it was because of necessarily the quality of work that they were putting out in these ones. It's just not super exciting about this one. So I'll start with actually kind of a different kind of review that I saw on this one. Hogan gets a big pop for the win, but ratings plummeted and Hogan took the blame, which of course more due to the brand split and bad writing than anything else he did. Of course, this all led to one of the funniest and saddest feuds in recent memory, Hogan versus Undertaker. Anyway, this match was awful, and its only redeeming quality is Triple H's mapped out plan for the first 18 minutes, 1 star. Pro Wrestling Torch on this one, again, they gave it 1.25 stars. Same thing. If Triple H was hoping to have a match against Hogan that outshined Hogan's match with The Rock, he didn't succeed on any level. Hogan's physical limitations prevented that. However, the length of the match hurt also. They were given too much time. Triple H probably saw the time allocated for the match as a noble challenge with a potential big payoff, but it backfired. Good use of the word payoff. The match was long enough to expose Hogan's weaknesses and make Triple H seem weak by not being able to dispose of a broken down old man. The WWF is banking on fans suspending their disbelief more than usual during this brief return to the Hulkamania area. Just tough on that one. This one too, and like I said, so that one got about 8 minutes too long, 1.25 stars. The Wrestling Observer, of course, this is actually in regards to the best match on the poll, came in last. It's again, no idea why they went this low. Hogan can't bump, and while he looked tired, he looked bad. There was only real heat in the last minute, but the crowd went nuts when Hogan won. Triple H bladed, and with the blood running down his face, he strangely looked like a face-painted Ultimate Warrior. Physique scary similar, which I don't agree with that. Like a lot of things are written.
His physique didn't even look close to Ultimate Warrior's. Ultimate Warrior had that like super chiseled, veiny, cut look. Triple H has never had that look. Triple H has the kind of big, bulky steroid look.
Yeah. He teased attacking Hogan, but after they shook hands, they posed together forever once the show went off the air. 1.25 stars. So both of these. So not great reviews. Tom, I'll let you go first.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Here's the thing, right, is in pro wrestling, you can do a lot of smoke and mirrors that can mask things. Okay. Hulk Hogan, just a month prior to this, had a great match versus The Rock. Hulk Hogan had some more really strong matches a year and 2 years after this, right? HBK, Randy Orton, Vince McMahon, right? So the idea that Hogan was tired and sucks, I don't believe that. What I think, I don't disagree in terms of their rankings. I just think it was a really bad storyline that didn't really make sense. Therefore, there was no heat for the match. So it was tough to be emotionally invested up until you knew the end was coming and you wanted Hogan to win the championship. Oh, and by the way, they just didn't lay it out properly. So if you felt there were limitations, take it to the outside, do a ref bump, throw someone through the table, get some interference. I mean, there's things they could have done earlier in the match. So, I agree it sucked. I'm just telling you why it sucked because I think it's different than why they think it sucked. So,
yes.
with that, if that makes sense. With that being said, you ready for my payoff score?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's going to be lower than mine, but go ahead.
Oh, gosh. I mean, the only thing saving this is Hulk Hogan's back in the red and yellow and wins a championship after being gone for, he wrestled at WrestleMania 9. This is WrestleMania 18, so he was gone for like 9 years. So him winning the title is the only thing that saves this. I'll give it a 4. Okay. And my 4 is based on big pop at the end. Hogan in the red and yellow wins the championship, but it was so poorly executed. I mean, knowing what happened, anyone listening to this right now could have come up with something significantly better. Okay. So I'm going to give it a 4. It's certainly not terrible. It's not the worst thing you'll ever watch, right? We've seen far worse, but man, it's a 4 that probably could have been, an 8 or something. So that's where I have it. What about you, dude?
I'm gonna give it a 2.5.
Okay.
I wasn't excited about it. It just, like I said, it did drag on for too long. I give it like 2, 1 for each. This was a match. I think unless they had like botched some things, like then you would have, really kind of I would have given it a lower score. It's this one, and we do a lot of different matches here because, part of it is, we want to remember these things. And, like you said, like rose-colored glasses on some of these things of like, this was it better than we had remembered? No, it was probably worse for me. Because it was one of those where I enjoyed digging into this stuff though, because I didn't remember a lot of this, but it was, like I said, I think the best analogy I have for this was really just kind of like it's like a stone paver on the way to the next paver, and that was really all it was. And to kind of have that, like you said, maybe the half a point because you got big pop from the crowd, and but the build itself, I don't think it paid off to anything, at least at this juncture. It still took some time before we got to the true payoff of all of these guys being involved in matches together. So that's where I kind of stand on mine. I think that could be my lowest score ever. So we don't track all of those, but yeah, I think that's down there for me. Yeah,
it was not as good as I remembered. Not that I remembered it being great, and just disappointing. It should have and could have been far better. So take us home, dude.
Yeah, so as of course, Triple H, you can find him on Twitter. He's just at Triple H, but write out Triple H, just not 3 H's. So you got Triple H. Hulk Hogan out there as well too. He is, no matter how you feel about him, people, if people have strong opinions on him, but at Hulk Hogan, you can always find him there. And so check him out. He's all over social media as well too. He's pretty active as well. So we got good stuff there. And so, exciting. And of course, find us on social media at PAYOFF Pod. And that's, give us those 5 stars, spread the word about the show. That's where we want to make sure that you're doing for us. So
do you want to tell everyone what we're covering next week? Because you haven't told me yet. Or are we going to keep people in suspense?
We're going to have to keep people in suspense because we don't know yet. So.
Okay, yeah, we do not know. We have tasked Jeff with coming up with a really good WCW match because we've been super WWE heavy lately. So Jeff has been tasked with coming up with a great WCW match. I'm very anxious to see what he comes up with. You should be too. And hopefully at some point before we record, I get to find out what the match is.
We will figure it out before then. I promise to let you know before it happens. At least a day or so, I'll give you notice. But we're going to bring you some WCW matches. We can tell you that much at least. So it should be exciting stuff.
Yeah, and we've got some good stuff coming up as we head into summer. We've got some anniversaries we want to hit. A couple matches I'm thinking about, but I think we'll get the WCW matches in there. I think we're due for like a TNA match at some point. We'll find out what else we can get. So, but it'll be fun.
We can give some love to some recently released superstars as well too, and kind of go back and find some of those matches as well too. So
we're due for some new guests too. So maybe we'll see if any of them want to come on the show. So good summer coming, man. I'm looking forward to it. We'll be able to get out of our houses and we'll be able to watch some wrestling. We'll get some guests on here. And Jeff, before you know it, it's going to be our first birthday here at the Payoff. That'll be exciting.
Yeah, we're going to have to do something exciting for that because that'll be good time. So yes, absolutely. We're looking forward to that just as much as hopefully everybody else is too.
All right. Well, as always, thank you for joining us on The Payoff.